Welcome back to another installment of Theory Throwdown, as you saw on Twitter, hashtag Theory Throwdown. And this is exclusive to the Dynasty Theory YouTube channel on YouTube, Dynasty Theory. Tonight, we have Dan, and he is bringing to the table Drew Lock versus Mitch Sorensen's Sam Darnold. Hopefully, he can avoid mono. So, Dan, just like we did last week, give us your opening argument why Drew Lock is the choice.
Hey, we're hot here tonight, JB. 1-0 coming off last week's Antonio Gibson win over Van Jefferson. We're looking to make it 2-0. And tonight, when we look at Drew Lock versus Sam Darnold, this is probably a prime example, JB. We've had a conversation about dysfunction in my rankings, and this is where I would apply them tonight, okay? You have two quarterbacks which are similar. You look at a draft, I think that you guys were in. I think Mitch shared earlier that Darnold went one pick before Drew Lock in a dynasty league. So if that's me and all things are equal, I'm looking at the situation and I'm totally Drew Lock. And this is why, okay? Opportunity with talent and the coaching around him, it is all there for Drew Lock. It is not for Sam Darnold. The Jets are going to mess this up. You could be a Sam Darnold truther. You could say, hey, he was a first-round draft pick. Lock was 2, this and that. But when you look at the weapons he has around him in fantasy football, I think it favors Drew Lock. The offensive line is better, okay? Sam Darnold, 7 out of 13 games last year. He was hurried 10-plus times. I know they patched it up a little bit, but it's patchwork, and it's going to get exposed again. So the O-line's better for Drew Lock. The run game's better to Drew Lock to take the pressure off the passing game, okay? Gordon, Lindsey to throw the ball to, Freeman if you still like him versus Bell, and nothing behind Bell, okay? Frank Gore's beyond ancient right now. I'm not a Pirine guy, so I give the run game edge to Denver. Then the receivers are better. Cortland Sutton is the best in the house there, okay? No one's comparing with Sutton in these two squads. Then you add Jerry Jeudy, who's a future star. You add Hamler, who gives him the speed and the deep threat. Hamilton gives him some depth. Noah Fant, stud tight end, and even Albert O for situations versus Perryman, Crowder, maybe Mims if he could get separation on defenders, Anunya. I'm not excited yet. Herndon and Griffin as your tight ends. Drew Lock's got the weapons, the offensive line protection, and the run game to take the pressure off. The defense is better in Denver as well. I think you're going to have a more competitive ball club. Fangio and Donatel, 29 years as an offensive coordinator versus, Greg Williams, who was with the Browns and showed some dysfunction there as well in Bounty Gate. But this is who the Jets are hiring. So you got the coaching better there. Mike Munchak led offensive line. I wanted my quarterback to be upright. And the organization's historically better in Denver, okay? 5 Super Bowls to the Jets 1. Unfortunately, Joe Namath isn't coming back anytime soon. I know the Jets Denver's had some tough years with quarterbacks. I'm sure Mitch will bring that up. But right now, they are trending up with Drew Lock. So give me Drew Lock over anything Mitch and the dysfunctional Jets have to offer.
So just like last week, again, my job is to be very impartial, very unbiased, and it's your job to convince the listeners that your player that you're bringing to the table is the choice in Dynasty. So just like last week, I'm going to go through a few questions. And last week I had everything written down and I sent the show notes and I dropped the ball a little bit. And Dan, you get frazzled when I don't have the show notes. So a few questions here. One, you talked about the running game in Denver. Is there any concern that really does limit Drew Lock's ceiling there with, Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay? I know you hate Royce Freeman, but do you think that limits Drew Lock's upside in that offense?
I'm going to say no, because Melvin Gordon and Le'Veon Bell are both going to eat in their own regards. I just think when you can't run the ball as well as Denver can, they're just going to be pinning that O-line and sending the pressure, and Darnold's going to have all those pressures again. And who's going to bail them out? Perryman and Crowder? They didn't do it last year with Robbie Anderson.
I'm going to throw the red flag. This is about Drew Lock. Your anti-Darnold sentiment can come out during the rebuttal. This is about Drew Lock. Do you think
that's true?
Do you think his upside is capped because of the running game? That was the question.
I'd say it'd be capped compared to, Mahomes, Prescott, Murray, but not compared to Sam Darnold. I think that offense is going to be more efficient, and he will get his yards and get his touchdowns and have more upside than Sammy Darnold.
Now, I know Mitch all the time, he scoffs at the idea when people bring up the argument of draft capital, But in this situation, it is an argument that could work in his favor. Sam Darnold versus Drew Lock. Is there any concern a second round pick for a quarterback really isn't, they're not that invested. And we've seen, I'm trying to be, again, very unbiased. I don't want to put a negative spin on it, but we've seen John Elway get it wrong in the past. Is there a concern that maybe he sees that and he's willing to pull the plug faster than usual?
No, they're all in on Drew Lock, and they proved that on draft day. I know Darnold was a first-round pick, but he had questions coming out of Florida State, throwing interceptions, and I think we've seen some some of that.
Florida State.
Oh, USC, my bad, USC. I had Florida State on the mind. My apologies. But we've seen those questions out of USC. Thanks for catching me there. But they are all in on Drew Lock, and I think Elway's finally got it right.
All right, so Mitch, we're going to throw it over to you. You've been stretching. You've been loosening up. He's getting ready, Dan. He's ready for a haymaker, it looks like. So you're bringing Sam Darnold, and you have him over Drew Lock. And you're putting your money where your mouth is, because I've seen you do it in startups. So why should the listeners believe in Sam Darnold, and why should we be going with Sam Darnold over Drew Lock for dynasty purposes?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually follow the rules here, and I'm not going to just continually bash Drew Lock through my opening take, but just make sure everyone knows that Dan didn't mention anything good about Drew Lock. He talked about everybody else in the offense, but not one good thing about Drew Lock. But as far as Sam Darnold goes, he was drafted number 3 by the Jets. And so we know, I'm not the biggest draft capital guy, but when it comes to quarterbacks, it does matter a little bit. But when he started, he was the youngest quarterback to ever start an opening season game. And so we knew from the get-go he was going to need a lot of work to progress. And I actually think he's on a lot of the same thing that Matthew Stafford was. Matthew Stafford was really young going through. He had 2 injury-riddled seasons before he had a huge blow-up season. And that's something that we're seeing with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was injured in his rookie year. He got mono in his second year. And now you watch the Jets, and they improved the whole offensive line. I could care less how many sacks he got last year, because they improved every single spot on that offensive line. There's going to be a little bit of cohesion issues going in, because offensive lines need time to gel, and they're not going to have that during the offseason. But that's really the only bad thing you could say about the pieces that they brought in. Bell is really good, but it's not even about the skill position players around Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, coming out of college, we knew he was accurate. He's proved that in the NFL. The only thing he is lacking in a skill set is deep ball accuracy. And everyone has pointed out that's a mechanical issue. And that's something that he has hammered home this whole offseason. He is working out, trying to fix the mechanical problem, because he knows that's what's going on. And going in the season, guess what? He's 23. He is younger than Joe Burrow. He is younger than Drew Lock. He is still a really young quarterback. And my last thing that I'll bring up is you kind of start to hear rumors about these quarterbacks when they're not panning out. We heard about Jameis Winston saying, well, he might not get that 5th-year option. And we heard about Mariota. He might not get that 5th-year option. We've already heard it about Baker Mayfield. Guess what? We've never heard about Sam Darnold. The Jets have never wavered from him being their franchise quarterback moving forward. So for the next 2 to 3 years, he is going to be there for the Jets, and that's what matters in Superflex leagues.
All right, so I have 2 questions for you, just as I had for Dan. First of all, yes, they improved the offensive line, and I've been screaming that too. You talk about free agency. You talk about the first-round draft pick there on the offensive tackle in Mecton. Do you think their line was so bad, though, that while they did improve, it's still not going to be good enough for Sam Darnold, who really isn't known as a mobile quarterback?
A big thing with offensive lines is I think they're overblown to a point. I think you should care about top 5 offensive lines for running backs, and you should care about bottom 5 offensive lines for quarterbacks, because the middle between the offensive line 10 to 20, does anyone really know the difference between those? So as long as the Jets moved from, I think they were the 28th worst for adjusted sack rate last year. If they move into the 20 or 19th spot, that's good enough to give him enough time to move forward.
All right. And then my next question, Dan already talked about the offensive weapons surrounding Drew Lock, and they made it a point of emphasis in the NFL draft. We're going to surround this guy with talent. Yeah, they brought Denzel Mims in here in New York, But is there a concern that the talent still is not there around Sam Darnold for him to really pop off and make a big time impact here?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. For what you're getting him at right now, you're getting him at like quarterback 26, 27, right around there. It might be quarterback 25, but even then, he's not going as...
I have to interject. I don't know if he's going that late.
Say it's quarterback 20, right? Say it's quarterback 20, which is probably fair. You're not looking for a top 12 season out of him. If he gets a top 12 season, then he's going to shoot up the boards that much. But I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for him just to be able to produce on a weekly basis enough to where a replacement level quarterback isn't going to take his job anytime soon, which is something that could happen with the other guy that we're talking about.
Okay, so now it's time for the rebuttal, Dan. And you already got into it, but now is your time to knock Sam Darnold and tell the listeners why Drew Lock is a better choice than Sam Darnold. We already got into the Drew Lock portion, but why is Sam Darnold not the choice?
He is not the choice because, Mitch is talking about his accuracy not being an issue, but then he says it is an issue on deep balls. Those 4 interceptions versus the Patriots was definitely an issue in accuracy last year, just like he had at USC. Again, my point before on the Jets was, how is he going to improve this year? I know you say he's young and he's growing. Well, he's already had that year 1 to year 2 jump, and here we are again. The offensive line is going to have trouble. It is a patchwork offensive line. It's not an improved. They didn't go get Trent Williams. They didn't, get any big studs. They made it a little better, but there was nowhere to go but up. So when that O-line's struggling, who's bailing them out? A wide receiver core that is practically the same as it was just a year ago, where, again, Drew Lock, it's a totally different situation there. You look at quarterbacks that go to the NFL and they don't pan out or they don't become great because of the situation around them. Unfortunately for Sam Darnold, that's what he is into. They are going to stand by him, JB, because that's their number 1 draft pick. They have to. They have no other choice but to stand by their first-round draft pick at this point in their career. But that is a dysfunctional organization that's going to be dysfunctional again, and Drew Lock's going to outscore him this year.
Before we get into Mitch's rebuttal, you guys know me, I'm crazy. And since I said it, I've been thinking about it. And I said Becton was the first one. Mekhi Becton. I kind of morphed it together. It's like when you have a celebrity couple and you put them names together. I did that with him. So Mekhi Becton, not Mecton, with their first round pick. Now, Mitch, here's your chance at a rebuttal. Why not Drew Lock?
So this is very easy. Anyone who knows Dan knows he loves his PFF offensive grades, but it's really magical that he didn't list him at all this week because, you look at Sam Darnold, you're like, he was 27th in the league, which is not good, right? I mean, that means there's 26 other quarterbacks better than him. Then you look for Drew Lock and you scroll and you keep scrolling. And then you get to guys like David Fells and you still don't see Drew Lock. And then he's right there above David Blau. I mean, he is so low that they don't even have a number next to him. So when you're actually looking at Drew Lock, coming out of college, this is what Kyle Krabs from the Draft Network says. And everyone knows I love the Draft Network. So whenever I talk about scouting profiles, I always go to them. He is woefully bad under pressure. He is late on too many throws, slow to move his eyes across the field, and is visibly caught progressive and needs ample time for the receiver to uncover. Has some awful lapses in judgment under pressure, looks lost dropping back. So that is a 2nd-round draft pick as a quarterback. We know that if you show any shred of ability, you're going to go in the 1st round. Look, we just saw Jordan Love go in the 1st round of the Packers when they have Aaron Rodgers. So if Drew Lock had half the skill as Sam Darnold has, then he would have a chance. But the fact is, the Broncos can cut him after the season or just flat out bench him, and they haven't lost anything but a 2nd-round draft pick. And 2nd-round draft picks fell all the time. We talk about all of those skill positions that Drew Lock has. Do you know who we also did that with? Eli Manning in 2018. He had Odell Beckham. He had Evan Ingram. He had Saquon Barkley. And what happened to Eli Manning at that point? We could do the exact same thing for Baker Mayfield as well. He has all of that talent. And what happens? Doesn't live up to it. Sometimes quarterbacks just aren't good enough, even though they have the skill positions around them. You don't get a flag on this, Dan.
All right. So again, we have the flow here. We're gonna keep it moving along. Dan, whatever thoughts you have in your mind right now, it's your closing argument. You can bring it together for Drew Lock. You can counter Mitch's point. You can drag Sam Darnold down, but bring it together here. Closing argument, Dan.
Saving the best for last. Stop with that second round quarterbacks don't pan out. And if you had any talent, you'd be in the first round. As my boy Dak behind me was far from a first or second rounder, and he's a stud. You got examples like Tom Brady. There's so many great quarterbacks that got drafted later that became excellent quarterbacks in the NFL. So forget the draft capital. Let's look where they're at now. And, that pro football focus, you're looking at 5 games of Drew Lock. And yeah, I reference that when it applies. Okay, I did see him a few spots behind Sam Darnold. That's sad that they're that close after Lock only has 5 games. But I watched the film. He struggled a little bit in Kansas City last year, which is a tough place to play. But he was 4-1 as a starter in his debut, and he looked confident as all could be. And it's not just me. I'll name drop again here, JB. Woody Page, who was on our show, who has seen every Denver quarterback ever in the last 30 years, including the great John Elway, says this kid's got the it factor. He looks like an NFL quarterback. He has it. And then John Elway goes and gives him all the weapons he needs, which is a lot more than Darnold has. So it is talent around him, minus the dysfunction of the Jets organization. Yeah, Darnold's going to be with him for a few years, but Gase is going to get fired in a year, and he's got to start all over. He's going to have a brand new offensive coordinator. So I don't want to go through that drama. I'm going to stay with the trending up Lock, and hopefully Sam Darnold doesn't see ghosts, Mitch, and throws 4 interceptions again with 86 yards passing and doesn't know what hit him. Denver's all in on Drew Lock. I am as well. You could have Sam Darnold and that coaching change and all the dysfunction in New York for the next few years.
All right, Mitch, over to you. Give us your closing argument here.
All right. So as we know, the only argument that Dan really has is I don't like Adam Gase. It's the only thing anyone brings up. If you bring up Sam Darnold, it's like, but what about Adam Gase? If Adam Gase is that bad, he'll be out next year. And whatever, we're playing Dynasty. We're not playing Redraft. That's why it's not the Redraft Theory podcast, as we've gone over before. But I mean, you're bringing up Tom Brady and comparing him to Drew Lock. I mean, it's might be slightly excessive there. And the only people that have actually bumped up Drew Lock are the ones who actually watched that lip sync battle on that awful cable show because they saw the little gif of Drew Lock kind of miming some rap song that was happening on the sidelines. I mean, it's the only reason why we like him is because there's a cool video of him, and that's really about it. So that jumped him up a little bit. But really, I think this one wasn't even fair. How do you really talk up Drew Lock when the only thing you could say, but everyone around him is really good? Dan didn't bring up one thing about Drew Lock's accuracy, what he does under pressure. Didn't bring up how he goes through reads. Didn't bring up one thing about Drew Lock. And really quick, one last, really small last thing. We want to bring up his 5 games. Do you know who Drew Lock played in those 5 games? The Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chargers. Guess what? Kansas City had the best defense there. All the rest of them, absolutely horrid. So, I mean, it's really good that Lock was good for 5 games against horrible defenses, but he wasn't even good. He was barely, not even average according to PFF. He was below the 30th ranked quarterback. So if that's what you want on your dynasty team, go for him. Someone who could be replaced next year, or just get Sam Darnold and be okay for the next 5.
And that's a wrap. No more argument, no more rebuttals. You guys kind of glitched there, but we're good. All right. So as the listeners, drop your comment on the video. Are you taking Drew Lock? Are you taking Sam Darnold? And I'm going to tweet out the link here. I'm going to put the poll on there, and we'll see who people are going with. Drew Lock, there's a lot of hype there. Sam Darnold, really young. Hopefully he can get out from under Adam Gase sooner rather than later. The thing is, here on my end, I like both of these quarterbacks, and I'm targeting both here throughout this offseason. So I really don't have a dog in the fight, but it's going to be interesting to see what people think. Mitch, Dan, I think this was a good fight. It was a good battle. Last week, Mitch, I think you were kind of at an unfair advantage. You were behind the 8 ball last week.
Little bit. This week's better. This week's a lot better.
So we'll see. We'll see if you can win this one. Thank you for joining us for Dynasty Theory, for Theory Throwdown. I got it mixed up there. For Theory Throwdown, drop a comment, like I said in the YouTube video, and let us know who your winner is, Drew Lock or Sam Darnold in Dynasty. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Theory FF. Stay safe and have a great night.